The people of Ireland are voting to elect a new president. After 14 years, Michael D Higgins is stepping aside. The race to replace him sees Catherine Connolly, a left-wing independent candidate, taking on Heather Humphreys, a politician from one of Ireland's main establishment parties. The winner will become president for the next 7 years. Hello and welcome to a special edition of Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady and I'm here by the banks of the River Lee in Cork, Ireland's second city. Michael D Higgins is stepping aside after 2 terms as President of Ireland. A hugely charismatic and respected politician. He was a humanitarian, a poet, a leader and a strong voice, not just for the people of Ireland, but for the people of Palestine. Replacing him will be no easy task.
President Michael D Higgins has come to the end of his tenure after 14 years. The Irish Presidency, a non-political role, is seen by many as the voice of the nation, a role he has played to a T. And these are the 2 women battling to replace him.
You've insulted Germany, you've insulted France, you've insulted the UK, our nearest neighbour, you've insulted the US. So that doesn't go without consequences.
Asking questions of the military-industrial complex and the direction that the compass is going in Europe is not the same as anti-European.
The race started off with a field of colourful contenders. Household names from Connor McGregor, Bob Geldof and Michael Flatley had all been touted. But it was whittled down to 3 candidates. Catherine Connolly, an independent member of Parliament backed by most of Ireland's left-wing parties, Heather Humphreys, an MP from the centre-right Fine Gael party, and Jim Gavin, a Gaelic football coach who was put forward by the ruling Fianna Fail party. But a last-minute twist has made it a 2-horse race for the finish line after Gavin dropped out due to a financial scandal. As the much-loved Michael D Higgins comes to the end of his 14 years as Ireland's president, do the public think any of the candidates can fill his shoes?
Who are you voting for in the presidential election and why?
At this stage, I'm of the opinion I'll vote for Catherine Connolly. At the start of the campaign, I would have said the opposite. But watching the interviews, the debates over the last 10 days, she has impressed me.
I'm going to vote for Heather Humphreys. Although the choice is not great.
The grey hair woman.
Catherine Connolly?
Yeah, she's the best. She's the most honest, yeah.
I'm not going to vote in the presidential election because I would be giving credence to the present government. And they're not my government. They have sold the people out.
Heather Humphreys is perceived by many as an establishment figure, holding ministerial posts for over a decade. Whereas Catherine Connolly, with her staunch anti-war and Irish Republican views, has struck a chord with the youth. Whoever is chosen to move into this White House, known as the Orus, will set the tone for the future of Ireland and its place in the world.
Well, let's bring in our guests here at Páirc Uí Chaoimh, which is the stadium in Cork that is home to Ireland's national sports of Gaelic football and hurling. Deirdre O'Shaughnessy is opinion editor of the Irish Examiner newspaper group. She's also a podcaster. We have Peter Horgan, who is a Labour politician and a Cork City councillor, and Ralph Regal, who is Southern correspondent with the Irish Independent newspaper group. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Deirdre, to you first of all, a word about the outgoing President Michael D Higgins, much loved here in Ireland.
Absolutely. It's very hard to see when you look back at Michael D's initial punt to the presidency that we would end up with most houses in the country having a tea cosy of Michael D Higgins over their teapot. That's the level of popularity you're looking at. I don't know if there's a leader worldwide who has tea cosies or pictures of them or memes or cartoons of them. People love Michael D. They love the idea of Michael D. They love the social media persona of Michael D. They love the intellectualism and the poetry. There's even a tribute poem to him, which has been put to music, which to my mind is going a little bit far, to be honest. But he has been inordinately popular. I think he's been a president for the times that we were in as well, these times of great social change. And Michael D's presidency has been kind of the background to all of that. He would have been known always as a particularly progressive politician, a very left-wing politician by Irish standards. Something which I think is interesting in light of the current debate about how left-wing one of our candidates is, because they would very much be in the same gene pool. But I think we have a tendency in Ireland to lionise the idea of those left-wing policies. Those are lovely, that's great, but he can't actually do anything about it. So we've never had a Taoiseach with those views, and I would say it's going to be a very long time before we do. But as a president, a lot of people would feel that he has represented their views, this modern Ireland, this intellectual and kind of slightly mystical version of Ireland as well, which he has really played into. I mean, he was an exceptionally good politician as a nuts and bolts politician, as a minister, and, you know, shrewd and clever as politicians are, not beyond getting into a dogfight. But all of that side of him has very much been sort of put away during the presidency, apart from a couple of times, I suppose, where he's gotten a little controversial on issues around war and peace generally. Gaza, I suppose, he's been very outspoken on, something, again, which most of the population would agree with him on. He was quite outspoken on matters relating to Russia and Ukraine earlier in that conflict, in a way maybe that wasn't quite as publicly, people wouldn't have agreed with in quite the same way, because again, he's coming from a very left-wing perspective on that. So, you know, the substance is there, but actually what people love, and particularly the younger generation that love him, is this, he's sort of a big thing on social media. He had dogs, and his 2 dogs had social media accounts, and all of this. So he was very much a president for the times that we're in.
Thanks, Deirdre. Peter, to you, just looking at the ballot paper, there's a name on there who's not even in the race anymore, Jim Gavin. So he was a former Dublin Gaelic football manager, a very, very successful manager and a big name in Irish sport, but he had to pull out with the race. Just talk me through why he left the race to be president and how big an issue it is that his name is actually on the ballot paper. People can still vote for him.
It's quite a big issue. It's not unheard of in Irish politics that you would have someone on the ballot paper who perhaps sadly would have passed away in the course of a campaign or would have withdrawn from campaigning because of a similar issue would have happened. But those are usually at local level, once or twice maybe at a parliament level. It's never happened at a presidential level. And it does throw up a number of questions. Look, Jim Gavin withdrew from the race because of a tenant overpayment issue a number of years ago, about 3,500, 3,300. That dogged him. There were issues within Fianna Fáil around vetting. There was issues in Fianna Fáil about did they do their due diligence. There was issues of the party backbenchers in Fianna Fáil not being listened to by the leader on Taoiseach Micheál Martin, who is a Cork TD as well, a member of Parliament. And what Fianna Fáil need to reconcile with now is what happens on polling day. Will there be a revolt against Micheál Martin's leadership in terms of that he was advising people, not completely advising outwardly to vote for Heather Humphreys, the Fine Gael candidate, but there is an understanding that Fianna Fáil people will now vote for the government candidate as it was. Will that happen? What will happen with his transfers? Because no matter what number of votes Jim Gavin gets, I don't think he's going to top the poll now, but he may finish second, but he probably will finish third, and his transfers will determine, I believe, who is going to become president, either Catherine Connolly or Heather Humphreys.
Thanks, Peter. Ralph, just how embarrassing do you think it is, this situation with democracy in Ireland, then, that you've got 2 women still in the race, Catherine Connolly and Heather Humphreys, and yet there will be a significant protest vote and some people will still tick the Jim Gavin box?
Yeah, I think it's ironic that just a couple of weeks ago people were complaining that it was one of the most boring elections in Irish history, and suddenly we find ourselves almost catapulted into a constitutional crisis because there's so many questions arising. What if Jim Gavin wins? What if by some miracle he tops the poll? What happens then? A candidate who is withdrawn from the race. And I think what it's done is it's shone a spotlight on the whole electoral process surrounding the presidency. I mean, for those who may not be familiar with Irish presidential politics, to run for the presidency, you must be an Irish citizen and you have to be 35 years old or older. And you're usually nominated by a political party, which means that you must have 20 members of the Oireachtas, in other words, of our Parliament or our Senate. And the extraordinary thing is we now find ourselves in a position where You have an anti-government candidate and a government candidate. Now, I was with Taoiseach Micheál Martin last week, and he's denying that we're in that position, but effectively that's what it is. And the candidates that might have transferred to Heather Humphreys, the Fine Gael candidate, are not on the ballot paper. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. It certainly will have long-term implications, I think, for the whole selection process. I think it could also have significant long-term implications for party leadership, because this is certainly the whole controversy surrounding Jim Gavin. Jim Gavin was Micheál Martin's personal pick for the presidency. He expended enormous political capital to get him through his party's nomination process, because Billy Kelleher, a former senator, former Member of Parliament, former junior minister, mounted quite a significant campaign and was only beaten because the weight of the party leadership was put behind Jim Gavin. And the very fact of the circumstances in which Jim Gavin's campaign imploded certainly damaged Micheál Martin. And I think a leadership challenge within Fianna Fáil is certainly closer than it would have been, say, a month ago.
Thanks, Ralph. Deirdre, the other big political party that international viewers will be aware of in Ireland is Sinn Fein. Mm-hmm. They did not put forward a candidate.
No, and as it turns out now, they're doing very well out of it. Catherine Connolly as this united left candidate. This is the first time we've had this, by the way, where Sinn Féin, first of all, haven't put forward their own candidate, but actually where all the left-wing parties have rolled in together. This doesn't really happen in Irish politics. The first thing to happen in any left-wing party meeting is the split, which, if you'll forgive me, Peter, for that. But the Labour Party are in on this one as well. So Labour, the Greens, who are now undergoing all sorts of drama because of it, Labour, the Greens, the Social Democrats, Sinn Féin are all in behind Catherine Connolly, as well as some independents. And of course, she wasn't independent. She was the Ceann Comhairle of the Dáil. She's very well known as that, which is the chair of the House, essentially the Speaker. And she's very known and very respected in that role. And that's kind of a good stepping stone if you look at it objectively, because that person is objective. They don't get involved in the dogfight in the chamber, and they have to sort of be outside of that. So Sinn Féin actually will have sort of, unknown to themselves, I think, at first, have pulled off a real coup here if, as is looking increasingly likely, Catherine Connolly does get elected. You can see how her campaign as well has benefited in the past couple of weeks from the involvement of Sinn Féin. So at the beginning, you know, there was a really strong grassroots vibe about it. She has beautifully designed posters. I don't know if you've seen them.
We've seen them.
We've obviously in Ireland, election posters are our big thing. Anyone who comes here from other countries is like, why are they? There's pictures of people's heads everywhere.
And they're still up a week later.
And they're still up for 8. Well, Jim Gavin's ones are still up because no one has taken them down. Catherine Connolly's ones are really designed, like they're beautiful. There's a lot of thought gone into those, and obviously that's because you have a lot of creatives involved in that campaign. You have a lot of kind of grassroots people who want to get involved in it. You have a lot of the people who are campaigning for things like Gaza, people who campaigned in both of those referenda that I mentioned earlier, who are involved with her campaign. But what you can see now, since Sinn Féin got involved, is the press strategy and the money has come in from somewhere. There's more posters. They're everywhere now. She had another set of posters which seem to have disappeared now because they weren't as nice. And just, you can see it's being very professionally managed. And that, on top of her enormous social media success, I think has made her actually a bit of a coup for them.
Thanks, Deirdre. Peter, just tell me, how can Heather Humphreys then stop Catherine Connolly from winning this presidential election?
The only way that I can see Heather Humphreys winning the presidency at this stage is via Project Fear. And just to take on what Deirdre was saying, like, this is the first time the left has united around a single candidate, and it's more than just the presidency at stake here. We are looking at down the barrel of trying to form a left-wing government for the first time in this country, and the presidency is going to be that litmus test of how it's going, and it's going rather well, and that frightens Fine Gael, Fianna Fail, and the more conservative establishment in this country. And you'll see over the last number of days Project Fear coming from the government parties regarding Catherine Connolly. I don't fully agree with everything Catherine Connolly says. I've never fully agreed with everything any politician says. And nobody has in the history of Irish politics. There's always some issue that someone doesn't agree with, but someone else will agree with or disagree with. And that's what Fine Gael are going down the line of. They're trying to unpick at different parties who maybe, in my own party as well, there are certain members who have said they will not vote for Catherine Connolly, and that is their choice. We are not whipped on the matter. It's the same with the Green Party. Sinn Féin are a different entity completely. But what Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, to another extent, and I've seen former Kerry senators clucking for Fine Gael, which is quite unusual in its own right. They're trying to unpick different kind of strands in the Connolly campaign and worrying about certain issues from Catherine's past that might arise, hypothetical issues of who she's going to hire in the Áras. You know, complete left field questions that wouldn't be put to a Fine Gael candidate in a month of Sundays. So that's the only way I think that Heather Humphreys is going to get the Áras, is through Project Fear.
Thanks, Peter. Ralph, Heather Humphreys is very much from one of the establishment parties here in Ireland.
Yeah, Fine Gael.
What would she bring if she were to become president?
Well, I think she'd bring a lot of experience. I mean, Heather Humphreys is a very, very experienced parliamentarian. She has served at virtually every level of government. And she's also a very personable individual. I mean, I've dealt with her many times over the years, and she is, in my opinion, a genuinely nice person. I mean, she's very loquacious when you deal with her. She's very warm. She has a nice way about her. Certainly, I think she would embrace the whole thing that Michael D Higgins brought to the Áras, which was this embracing people and communities. Then again, Catherine Connolly has very much tapped into that type of thing as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how it goes. I think Heather Humphreys is hamstrung in ways in that she doesn't want to portray herself effectively as the government candidate, because by that very definition she'll get blamed for all of the stuff that has happened over the years. And the difficulty she faces is that Fine Gael have been effectively in power since 2011 here in Ireland. And we're in the middle of a housing crisis. There's lots of other things like that going on. And it tends to be a lightning rod if you're the government candidate. Distinguishing herself from that has been a challenge. I think it really wasn't until the debate the other evening where she was very, very impressive. I mean, she certainly had Catherine Connolly on the back foot. And as I think Peter and Deirdre referenced earlier, the whole issue of transfers, you would think that people who vote for Jim Gavin would transfer to Heather Humphreys as a Fine Gael candidate, because Fianna Fail are in government with Fine Gael. But there seems to be increasing indications that the vote to Jim Gavin is going to be a protest vote. And the concern is that it might be a number one, but you won't see number twos and number threes. So it's all to play for, but certainly the momentum and the wind is very much behind Catherine Connolly.
Thanks, Ralph. Deirdre, just talk to me about voter disinterest. Speaking to people on the streets of Cork this week, I've picked up on a bit of antipathy towards the whole process.
Yeah, as Ralph was saying earlier, you know, a couple of weeks ago we were saying this is the most boring campaign in the history of the world. There's nothing happening. They're all really dull. Can we just get on with it? And the thought of all those debates, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I have not been able to watch all the debates. They're so dull. And there is an issue in presidential elections because the Irish president doesn't really have any power. What are they debating? They can't really say anything particularly controversial. They can't be seen to be nasty or to be kind of picking at the other person. So you don't want a president who's actually a particularly vicious debater. You want someone who's going to be nice and welcome people in and give them tea into the Áras. And that's kind of the impression they're trying to convey. So I think people know that in terms of it's not, in some respects, it's not actually a particularly high stakes election. Like, it's not going to affect how many houses are built next year. It's not going to affect whether your child can get a medical appointment. It's just going to affect who's the nice person that meets visiting ambassadors and are they going to say something really offensive to them. And you know, over the last few years, there have been a couple of instances where Michael D has said things that the government have gone, oh, that wasn't us. And I think any president can potentially do that, but maybe depending on the views that are there, some might be more likely than others. But having said that, I think people generally are sort of saying this isn't a hugely high stakes thing. I think voter turnout is going to be incredibly low.
Really?
Yeah, I don't
What
think...
percentage would you say?
I would hate to bet my shirt on it, but it certainly won't go over 50%. I'd be very surprised if it would. Ralph is nodding there. He's much more seasoned election watcher than I am, but I think
40%.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really, really low. And I think the issue then is, I suppose, that Connolly campaign and the sort of youth of it and the vigour of it, will they vote? Is the problem.
Peter, just on that point, young people, every time I go on social media, there's only one candidate I see. Catherine Connolly playing basketball, Catherine Connolly playing football, keepy uppies. Young people are being drawn into her world.
Yeah, she's lit the torch paper with young people, and I don't know how she did it. You know, I don't think she has done anything particularly different than what she did over the last number of years as a TD, but maybe giving her to a wider audience and coming, like, she is a Galway TD, so she would be well versed in Galway University, so she understands the university setup there. And around universities, I know in UCC and MTU, there is a massive groundswell of support for her. I can't put my finger on it. I'm not sure why it is. I don't know, is it because, like we said, about Heather Humphreys being the government candidate, Jim Gavin perhaps maybe didn't set the world alight when he was the candidate, and young people are looking for something different. I mean, it's interesting in age. You know, she's not in the flush of youth. She is, you know, of a certain age. Michael D was of a certain age and really grasped the young vote and the young voice. And it's an interesting issue where young people are looking at people much, much, much older than them to be their voice on social issues. And I think that's what they're seeing with Catherine. They see a bit of what maybe people my age would have seen in Michael D when he ran for the presidency, someone who can give a voice to the soul of the nation. And maybe that's what they want to feel. And it's on politicians like myself, maybe, that we haven't tapped into that voice. And maybe they feel that the politicians that are regularly being shown on TV or regularly in their area aren't speaking for them, but Catherine Connolly can. Maybe that's it, I don't know, but it's a good point. And will they come out and vote? It's all well and good to go out canvassing and to have keepy uppies and, you know, to have great kind of social media videos, but will they go out and vote? And my concern is on the turnout as well. I have a concern that the Fianna Fail voter won't come out and vote. That rather than go out and put the mark behind a Fine Gael candidate, that they will simply just stay at home. And I know that from hearing canvassing reports from councillors that I'm in the Labour Party with, that they're hearing from die-hard Fianna Fail people that either they're going to vote for Connolly or they're just simply not going to vote.
Thank you, Peter. Ralph, just talk to me about the voice of the Irish president. So it's a figurehead role, but as we've seen from Michael D Higgins, he has been proudly pro-Palestine. He has spoken on every occasion for the people of Gaza. It's a very important role in Irish life, and being that figurehead, as much as it's welcoming people into Ireland, it's a big voice in the world.
Very much so, and I think it's important that people realise Irish history. We were never colonisers. You know, you can argue that we were colonised. So Irish people have a natural empathy with countries that are emerging from that whole colonial period. We don't really have a major army to speak of. Our defence forces are usually deployed in peacekeeping roles. We have very limited investment in defence equipment such as the Air Force, the Navy, whatever. But what Ireland does have is soft power. And we have a major diaspora across the world, people who are proud to claim Irish ancestry. And Ireland is able to tap into that, and Ireland is able to step up and speak about issues such as famine. You know, you have Bob Geldof, the work he did to highlight the famine in Sudan. You have Mary Robinson. I mean, presidents have set a very, very high standard and a very high crossbar in Ireland. Mary Robinson, the work that she did to highlight civil rights and human rights. You have Mary McAleese, the incredible work that she did about the peace process to bring about a better relationship between Ireland and the UK. You have Michael D Higgins, who did very much the same and who wasn't afraid, as Deirdre said, to speak out about issues like Gaza and about countries in the world where, you know, humanitarian issues are a major concern. And I think whoever comes into Áras an Uachtaráin, that's the type of role that they're going to look to do. It can be tricky. I mean, several people have mentioned it before, and there were issues. The president is not supposed to speak on policy. So when the president does, I know Michael D has done it a couple of times, but I think the government looked and realised that he was so popular that if they brought him over the coals, they were the ones that were going to be on a loser. It did happen in Mary Robinson's era back in the early 1990s. Mary Robinson had tried to fast track the peace process and accelerate the improvement in relations between London and Dublin. And that was something that the government were concerned about, first under Charles Haughey and then under Albert Reynolds, because it was a very painstaking process and they didn't want things to go too fast. In particular, an invitation to Queen Elizabeth to visit Ireland, which we know happened eventually in 2011 and was a momentous event both for the UK and for Ireland, and put good relations between our two countries on a much better footing, as they should be. So it's a very powerful role. It's a role that brings lots of soft power, and it's a role that also allows people to tap into this enormous Irish diaspora. I think you're talking over 30 million people in the US alone claim Irish ancestry, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, even Argentina. So it's quite a significant role and power that can be exploited.
Thanks, Ralph. Deirdre, there's one discrepancy I want to look at. The north of Ireland.
Yes.
People living in the north of Ireland can run to be President of Ireland, but they're not allowed vote.
Yeah.
It's very strange, isn't it?
Yeah, there's been a campaign on this for the last number of years. Emma D'Souza, who is a Northern Irish journalist and commentator and a political campaigner, has took a case on this matter, actually, on the whole Irish citizenship issue. And it is an anomaly, and it is quite difficult to see how you solve that, because I think the fear is that if the vote is extended outside of the state, then you do have 30 million Americans voting in the presidential election, and suddenly we have, whoever our equivalent of Donald Trump is on the ballot. So I think there's a legitimate reason for it in that sense, that you're looking at the diaspora once you go beyond Northern Ireland, but there has to be some way of bringing Irish citizens who live in the north into the fold more politically. There's been various attempts by different political parties to set up in the north in terms of Fianna Fail kind of tried it and it didn't go anywhere. There's been, obviously, Labour have had links across the border as well. Sinn Fein clearly are an All-Ireland party, and the only ones who seem to have been able to do that really successfully. But there are plenty of Irish citizens in the north who don't want to vote Sinn Fein, I'm sure, and there is no real access to them, to the Dublin government, we'll say. So that's something, I suppose, that there's been talk of Seanad reform over years, and potentially the Seanad is the place for that to be addressed. But we'll be waiting a very long time for that to happen, I think.
Deirdre, just as we reach the end of our conversation, just quickly, I want the prediction from everyone. Who's the next President of Ireland?
Connolly by a shade.
Connolly.
President Connolly it is. Deirdre, Peter, Ralph, thank you all for joining me on Roundtable. And if you like what you see and you want more debate and discussion, please do head to YouTube, search for TRT World Roundtable and click like and subscribe. But from me, from Enda Brady here and all of the Roundtable team in Cork, goodbye and thank you for watching.